be safe and sorry. That's right.
Yes, but I need to say something. Let me do it first, and then say something.
How are you? How are you?
What's up,
Behave
bro?
yourself. Call to order the meeting, Mayor and Council. Thank you all for being here tonight. If you'll rise for the invocation by Councilman McCoy. If you would please bow your heads. Dear Lord, thank you for this day. Thank you for the opportunity to gather in your name. Lord, thank you for blessing this city, our community, and our nation, Lord. Lord, continue to watch over us, please. Lord, continue to work on us, provide us with your will to make integral decisions on behalf of the city. And Lord, continue to watch over us and go about our day. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen. Please remain standing for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. May be seated. Okay, do we have any changes to tonight's agenda?
Yes, sir, we have one change. We would like to remove new business number 3 from the agenda and bring it back at a future time.
Okay, do you need a motion to accept the agenda with agenda item number 3 removed?
If you don't mind, we'd
Okay,
like
if
to.
there's no questions or comments, I'll accept the motion.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to strike new business item number 3 for future presentation.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, okay, it's unanimous. As a reminder, we do have an executive session tonight following our regular meeting. You've all received the minutes from our February 28th meeting. If there are no questions or comments, I'll accept the motion to receive those minutes.
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion from Councilman McCoy. Is there a second?
Mr. Mayor, I'll second that motion.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, that's unanimous as well. All right, with that, I'm going to call up Director Bennett for a presentation before a public comment.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, City Manager.
Good evening. Good evening.
This time I'd like to call one of my employees up, Nick Moore. Nick Moore has been with the city, coming on 5 years service with the city in the electric department. During those years, he completed the Northwest Lineman College. That's 4 modules, 8 weeks of training in Virginia. 40 tests and some evaluation of the task he completes on the job. He's done very well in those. He completed his test with like a 96% completion ratio, very well. He's also attended training on the SCADA system out to the shop and attended meter school, North Carolina State University. And just recently, he accepted the position of technical coordinator with the electric department. He's the third lineman I've had that's completed all the training at Northwest Lineman College. I'm a big believer in training, and
Amen.
Nick, just want to present you with your Northwest Lineman College line worker certification program and the oath of excellence. So, thank you. Congratulations.
We also have a certificate from the city. Also, we want to recognize the effort that you put in, the sacrifice from your family being away at that training. I'm going to invite Councilman McCoy, who's the liaison for Electric Up, will take a picture.
You can get both of them.
Congratulations.
Please don't feel obligated. You have to stay for the entire meeting. We appreciate you coming out. Okay, public comment. Do we have anybody here tonight for public comment?
Yes, first on the list is Dan Cannon.
Mr. Cannon?
I would anticipate that my public comment might take 2 minutes more than the 3 normally allotted. Is that okay?
Sure, Mr. Cannon.
Thank you. I didn't have the inside information that you're not going to discuss new business number 3, because that is the topic of my presentation and public comment tonight. Nevertheless, I believe it's important that although tonight I had planned to make a public comment praising plans to start the Nye Capital Center redevelopment, and developer Rob Herrera for asking citizens to provide input directly to his 9th Street Development LLC. I got a rude shock when I looked at the agenda. Reading new business number 3 on tonight's agenda nearly made me sick to my stomach, to be honest. This is because mayor and city council seem to be on the path to try and eliminate special elections in which voters must approve or disapprove major borrowing proposals. To be more specific, as I read the proposed charter changes, any large-scale borrowing, millions, from so-called state or federal revolving loan funds would no longer require approval by voters through a special election, generally referred to as a referendum. This is a terrible idea and amounts to the elimination of prudent voter control over major borrowing by elected officials. As background, the referendum process has been a part of the City of Seaford's Charter, Section 35, for decades, likely dating back to the state of Delaware's legal provision of self-governance to towns, cities, and municipalities more than 50 years ago. The current referendum process was designed to be a check on the spending habits of elected officials. It was also designed to be relatively slow and deliberate with multiple steps. This was and is to make sure that the citizens of the electorate of Seaford were well aware and informed of the specific details of not only the proposed spending, but also the plans for repayment of the debts to be incurred. The current stepwise borrowing process requires that the City Council, 1, passes a resolution proposal detailing borrowing, sets a time and place for a public hearing about the resolution, and then provides for at least a week's notice of the hearing in a local newspaper. 2, the city council then approves a second resolution setting a date and time for a special election, a referendum, in which voters will approve or disapprove the proposal. 3, that special election or referendum is held no less than 30 days, no more than 60 days after the hearing, and is preceded by 2 issues of printed notices of the special election in a city newspaper. The City of Seaford holds a special election in which the Seaford Board of Elections tabulates and reports the votes to approve or disapprove the proposal to City Council. These deliberate measures would provide the time and opportunity for voters to be and become informed about the issues surrounding proposed borrowing, certainly gaining my approval, and even maybe likely the approval of Representative Danny Short. In addition, as these are pocketbook issues, this process would likely attract voter interest and make voters more likely to become involved, as well as more likely to show up for an election. This would certainly gain my approval, and again, hopefully likely the approval of Representative Short. There are multiple deficiencies in the current proposal which would tend to perpetuate a less transparent process and contribute to a Seaford electorate being less informed, less involved, and less likely to vote in all municipal elections due to the fact that this proposal has no provisions for a public hearing, no public notices in local newspapers, no extended time frame for consideration and debate, no special election or referendum to secure public approval. Simply put, this proposed abrupt change in the City of Seaford's charter would take significant power of the purse out of the hands of 5,000 eligible voters and put that power in the hands of just 5 individuals on the City Council. Instead of a process that requires a minimum of 45 days, Mayor and City Council could commit to borrow millions in just a week's notice. These actions would be imprudent, undemocratic, and fiscally unwise, especially in light of existing City of Seaford plans to spend millions on wastewater treatment projects, likely using state or federal revolving loan funds. Some wastewater treatment upgrades are absolutely necessary, but some current wastewater treatment expansion plans are based on few, if any, evidence-based facts or needs. Necessary or not, the current proposal to eliminate voter scrutiny, review, approval would allow the City Council unchecked rein on spending approval. Therefore, the current proposal to eliminate voter approval for borrowing is a step in the wrong direction for Seaford. The voice of Seaford should reflect the will of up to 5,000, not just 5 voters. The proposed charter changes should be rejected outright. Thank you.
Okay, do we have anybody else here tonight for public comment?
We just have one more on the list, Mr. Paul Sell.
How you doing? My name's Paul Sell, live at 327 Pine Street. I missed the last council meeting, I was under the weather, but I wanted to come here on that meeting to thank you, Mayor Genjal, and thank you, City Manager Anderson, for personally meeting with me and getting involved in the problems I was talking about at previous meetings. So I do want to thank you guys for that. It makes me feel good that you're willing to get involved. What I want to talk about tonight is, you know, I've lived in this city off and on for probably 30 years now. I love the city. I still consider it a small town, although it's not quite as small as where I came from. But a lot of these small towns, get recognized for wrong reasons. If you go 100 miles north, 100 miles west, 100 miles south, and mention Seaford, Delaware, people go, huh? They don't know us, and that's fine with me. But I don't ever want to be known for places like East Palestine, where the derailment happened. I don't want that to happen to us. I know we have a rail line that goes to us about a quarter mile down the street, and I do know there are hazardous chemicals on that line. Adipic acid and what we used to call diamine for short at the plant, because I worked at the nylon plant. That's needed to make nylon. So I know those 2 chemicals are on the trains. I have done a little bit of research of my own. They're hazardous, but they're not terrible. They're not like vinyl chloride. And the public really needs to know what is going through this town on the railroad. And many people are not gonna do the research. I've done a little bit of research, like, the hazards of adipic acid and diamine. They're not great. But they're, like I said, they're not like the vinyl chloride derailment in Ohio. And, like I said, everybody can research that has a smartphone. They can find that information for themselves. But to me, you guys need to know that information. You need to know what's going through our town. You're the city council. I think that information should be in your heads. And if it's not, make it that way. And I would like to maybe see the city council research what is on the railroad line, the railroad safety record, and have that put in the public record so we all know. Okay? So I don't know if that can be done, but that'd be nice. And other things that happen in small towns. One thing I think we can probably address in this town, you've heard of the electrical grid attacks in a lot of small towns. I think one was South Carolina, and where basically small arms fire was fired into the substations and caused a lot of damage, cost a lot of money. And I know Seaford has and maintains 2 substations, I believe, if I'm correct. And from what I've seen, the security around these substations is basically chain link fence. That's why small arms fire can destroy these substations. I believe they need to be more secure. And I know that the Department of Homeland Security is sitting on billions of dollars of grant money. And it's for things like this for the security of our infrastructure, and that includes the electric grid. Maybe the city council can do some research. Can we get some funds from Homeland Security to maybe put up brick walls around these substations? You know, cement block walls, something's gonna make them more secure. And I think it's a lot smarter and a lot cheaper to be proactive than reactive.
Yes, sir.
And if our substations get attacked, that's reactive, and we can probably stop it. Okay, thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Do we have anybody else here for public comment tonight? Okay. All right. With that, do we have any correspondence tonight?
No, sir, we do not.
Okay, we'll go on to new business number 1. We're going to invite up Mr. Herrera to give us an update on the shopping center.
First off, thank you guys for having me back. As promised, I am going to make a habit of coming up here and giving you guys progress updates as we continue. As you know, it's a large 22-acre site that we're undertaking, and it's a monumental task. So it's I just want to remind everybody before we dive into this presentation that we closed on this property late December. So this has been lightning speed, and we moved at a pretty good clip. Since our closing, and with your support, we have launched several tasks all at once. One is, as mentioned in the last meeting, we started our property conditions assessment. That is still ongoing. We have a lot of data that we took from that has informed our site plan, which we're going to share with you guys shortly. We've also hired our land use attorney, which is informing our site plan as well. I'm proud to say that we've hired Jim Fuqua from Fuqua, Willard, and Schwab. Sorry, I might have pronounced that a little off. But they are now engaged with us, and they've been informing our layout. We've also launched a request for proposal, an RFP process for 8 different civil engineers. We've narrowed them down to 2. We were making the selection this week. I was trying to rush it to announce today, but we had a few more questions for our 2 finalists. But I will have that for our next meeting's update. So moving along, I just want to show a little bit of our site analysis that went into our project here. I'm going to kind of move through these slides. But we've hired and engaged a design firm. They're just going to help us with the master planning and some of the schematic designs. They're out of New York. It's a firm that I used to work for. And I had them engage with this. They've been to Seaford with me several times. I kind of talked them into coming down here with me. We spent a couple days walking around and exploring Seaford, and I wanted to pick up the context that we wanted to sort of feel. I kind of like the idea of somebody outside sort of with a fresh pair of eyes looking at the site in a different way. We had a really good exploration sort of idea phase where we went back and forth and we checked out the different aspects of the community. And like I said, we spent days down here. And then we're on this iteration that I'm getting ready to share with you guys is iteration number like 23. So we're finally got to a point where we're ready to lock it in, and I'm ready to share with you guys. Sorry it's a little small. I would love to zoom in a little bit more. I showed a layout in the last meeting and some suggested sort of ideas of where we're going. This is taking into account, I wish I had a laser pointer here if my mouse can show. No.
If you go to that one over there,
There you
then,
go.
yep.
Yeah, so this is our updated site plan. What came out of our property condition, our first phase of doing a property analysis? It's still ongoing. Next, we're going to check out the. Next, we're going to, does that work? Next, we're going to check out the HVAC and other conditions of the property. But right now, in the middle of the building, this is sort of chopping that existing large retail building where Peebles used to be, I believe, in two, and creating a new corridor down the middle of the site that'll take you back towards what we're calling our institutional buildings, and I'll get into that in a second. But what we found, and we studied this, our first intention was to rebuild the bowling alley. We had talked about that with several people. The bowling alley is actually in really good condition. So as we studied it and we dug in further, and we have surveyors are out at the site measuring it now, but it's 18,000 square feet, and it's actually, the lanes are in great shape. Everybody that we talked to thought it made sense to keep that. So we're going to try to maintain this existing footprint here. There used to be an appendage on the building on the backside that has a lot of water damage. So we'll take a portion of that off, but keep and maintain the bowling lanes. That's the most valuable piece. And I think on that topic, we've interviewed 3 different bowling operators. And hopefully, again, in the near future, we're going to have somebody nailed down. But we're keeping our options open as we keep developing this project. The idea with the bowling is that we're going to add a social hall on the front to sort of abut the street. And I'll show a rendering of what we're trying to create there. And it's just sort of giving a new face to an existing bowling alley, so it feels new, right? Even though really it's kind of just an appendage on an existing large building. We have spec retail to the south, and what I'm really excited about, and again you'll see in the renderings, is creating a beer garden that's a part of that process. It's exciting and fun. Across the street is the mill. Again, I'll have some renderings to show you guys what we're working with there. And if any, I know we hosted the mayor two or 3 weeks ago up at the mill, so he checked out the concept. You guys are all welcome to come visit and check it out. I encourage you to do so. It's an exciting concept up in Wilmington that we run and operate. And then off to the left, and again, this came down to cost. We're starting to price these buildings out now. We're studying keeping Sal's where he is and just expanding him a little bit because after meeting with him, he wants a larger banquet hall behind his space, so we're going to work with him. And that way, if we moved him to a new building, we'd have to push his rent up. We want to keep him on the site. We've committed to that since day one after speaking with all of you. So we're going to try to maintain him there. We're going to keep some spec retail off to the left. And there's a reason for that because I have been fielding a lot of inquiries since my first meeting. And a lot of community members want to open their own concepts from bakeries to coffee shops and other things. And if we keep some existing retail, we can offer some favorable lease rates versus some of the new construction buildings are going to push for a higher price per square foot. As you move back in the site down the corridor, we're excited to create this green space, and we're building institutional buildings around that green. And again, I have a rendering. As mentioned, we have a proposal in front of Dell Tech. We're really excited. They're actually entertaining taking even more square footage than what we're currently showing as we're having this continued back and forth. So I'm excited to announce that. Another announcement for tonight, on the top left corner, the board has approved to move forward. We do not have a signed lease yet, but we have all committed to bring Montessori Works to the site. And it will be an early education program that feeds into Sussex Montessori, which is right down the road. So really excited to announce that. I've spoken to their board twice now. They have a layout that we just sent them, a conceptual layout that we're pricing off of that'll get us down to a term sheet. They're obviously very budget conscious, and they have a couple operating concerns that they're working through, but right now we're all committed to getting them to come to this site. We think it'll feed nicely into the other concepts we have there. In addition to that, we're looking at 21,500 square feet of a healthcare component that'll feed into the education training that Dell Tech's committed to bring to the site. I can't announce that provider yet, but we've had a lot of prolonged conversations, so much so that we have test fit layouts in front of them as well. That proposal will go out in the next 2 weeks, though. We're not quite ready to send that proposal out because, as you know, with healthcare fit outs, the cost can balloon. We're making sure we're getting our estimates right in the range that would make sense for them. So that's our current layout. That's what we're looking at now. We're really excited with the progress we made. This is, again, it's just a phase one, and we've got enough parking, as you can see, around the perimeter to accommodate the use groups we have here. After we did this layout, we immediately sat down with City Manager Charles Anderson. He was wonderful to work with. This was just a preliminary meeting, introducing our team to him, introducing our concept to see if he had any concerns. He gave us a nice roadmap from everything with Del Dot to utilities, working down, because again, as you all know, we have an accelerated timeline. We want to get started on this. We're eager, just as like everybody else is, to get going. So he gave us great advice, and the next meeting after we select our civil engineer, we'll sit down again and have a more comprehensive, detailed meeting from there. This is an aerial, just giving you context of the site as it exists today. The labels are a little blurry here, so I'll just to give you context, that's the Rite Aid up here, Sal's is here, this is the Dollar Tree over here. This was that former gym space. One of the reasons why we put the Montessori school in that former gym space is in pristine condition, and it just didn't feel right demolishing that building. I think we could do a really favorable deal with the early education program if we reuse that space. And they like that idea as well. It actually perfectly fit their programmatic requirements. So this is the concept. So this is just a rendering. Again, this is very preliminary. We're throwing sort of ideas up, but you can see that main spine, that cut through. I'm going to flip back and forth. That cut through that once large building, and right in the middle where that massive building one is, kind of has some of the worst water damage. So it made sense to bring that lane right to the middle and up the heart of the site. And you'll see that we're trying to really invigorate this core. And you're going to see two renderings in the next slides that are taken from here and here, because it's all about creating this sort of exciting corridor that's walkable, fun, hopefully dynamic, and brings in some fun retailers to match the vibe that we're trying to create. So this is our first rendering. Again, this was created with our partners out of New York, S9. This is just preliminary. We're going to hire a local architect as we get going. This is just us sort of throwing ideas up against the wall. But what we're trying to accomplish here, and with that corridor that cuts through the heart of the site, is this walkable vibe, lots of plantings. I mean, think about what it is today with all the asphalt and pavement, right? We want to bring in some trees, some plantings, and really bring it close to the street with some parallel parking, so there's a little bit of a buffer there. Off to the left, the brown building is a spec retail concept. The mill to the right, again, this is very conceptual, but that would be a two-story building with retail below. We already have conceptual layouts and a pro forma of what that will look like. It's 15,000 square feet on the top floor, 15 to 20,000 square feet on the ground floor. It varies in size and shape. We're really excited about that, and that mirrors across. And if you zoom in here, you can see, we don't have a name for this yet, but we put Seaford Lanes just for fun as a concept. But that's that appendage that we talked about, sticking on the existing bowling lanes, but putting this new sort of beer hall, social hall, with an outdoor beer garden on the front of the existing bowling alley. That can be done pretty cost effectively, and it changes the whole vibe of the site, right? So we're really excited about that. And again, we're looking for this steel superstructure, kind of rustic industrial vibe that goes with that. And then moving further into the site, that's the green that we wanted to create with the institutional buildings that are wrapped around that green, sort of shaping that center core. We're looking at some different sculpture. We've actually interviewed a few artists to do a focal point in the middle of this. We would love to, and one of the changes I had that is not implemented here is I really want a large tree in the middle that's evergreen so we could wrap it for Christmas every year. I think that's just a cool focal point as well. But so we're working on that, and you can see Del Tech off to the right. At the next meeting, we're working on a rendering looking back at the Del Tech building. But so this is sort of the context and the space, and this is where we spend a lot of our time working out the proportions and shapes of the roads, the spacing of the green, the sort of walkability and the sidewalks that'll be part of our concept. Yeah, so we're really excited to share our progress there. And then as always, we are always asking for feedback, and I have to tell you that we got a ton after our last meeting, and we really do take that in. From that, I can't announce all the retailers. We have a long list of potential retailers that came from our last meeting. We have an updated link that's a little simpler than the last one we had. That's 9sdc.com/nylon shopping center. And it'll take you right to a sheet where you can give us feedback. We've gotten requests for pickleball all the way through to maintaining Sal's to really bring back the bowling. That's been a really common element. We were already planning on doing that, but it's great to reaffirm and get 20 or 30 inquiries that somebody really wants that here. We've also gotten a cafe who's very interested that I can't announce just yet. and a potential creamery that I can't announce just yet. But we've had a lot of people that have come through that portal, so I highly suggest people use this. We really do look at it. I get sent a whole link every Friday with all the breakdowns and summaries of what the community had to say. So it's a really useful tool, and we're committed to keeping this live all the way throughout, even throughout construction, because we might have spec retail in the future as well. Are there any questions at this point?
Well, I know couple questions people are going to want to know the answer to is, what is your estimate on demolition or work starting, physical work starting on the site?
Yes, so we have an evolving project schedule. What happened is our first plan, we went and we were going to do all new construction, came back with a really high budget. We're like, let's tone this down. I only mention that because when we're reusing a lot, we're going to kind of have two phases now. A lot of the existing buildings that we're going to keep, we're going to move at a fast track and start gutting and getting them ready for renovation and white boxing them this summer into fall. So that'll move at a different pace. So for instance, the Montessori space, I would love to ramp them up. There's no reason for them to wait for the new buildings to be done.
Right.
So we've got a little bit of an expedited schedule since we made that decision to keep some of those things. For instance, the bowling alley, we started the surveys. So those will run on a different track. So that'll start, I would say, this fall to be conservative. I'm pushing for sooner. And then demolition will go in parallel to those retrofits. So this summer into early fall, we'll start and it's more selective demo now. It used to be in the last meeting we were going to plan to bulldoze half the buildings. So that's when we're going to start all that. And then as soon as that's done, we're starting site work. So that's why the civil engineers engaged now. We'll start getting the pad sites ready. Again, coming out of the ground with new construction Q1, Q2 of '24 with the new buildings. Okay. But what's exciting about this new updated plan is, again, the existing buildings could be potentially done by the time we're coming out of the ground for the new buildings, which I think helps the schedule a little bit.
Questions from council? No questions? When do you think you'll be back for another update? When do you think you'll have some of these things locked in so the public knows when to expect to see you again?
Within the next 2 months.
Okay.
So again, one thing I forgot to mention, so we launched the RFP process with civil, so I will announce that at the next meeting. We're going to know that in the next 2 days here, though. We also have sent out 4 of the 8 proposals for the institutional partners that we're working with. So I should hopefully have some feedback there and start to lead. I'm hoping that we should have some leases in hand within the next 2 months, but at least sign proposals where I can announce publicly, similar to the Montessori works. So I'll tentatively say within 2 months, because it might be sooner if I get a lot of feedback from these proposals.
Okay, and we'll repost all this. Tricia will get that back out so the public knows how to get in touch with you, and appreciate you coming, sharing what you know as up to this point, keeping the public up to date, keeping us up to date. I'm really trying to contain myself how excited I am from where we started a year and a half ago to where we are today. Almost everybody in this room was here at that shopping center the day we announced. It's pretty exciting, and to see how fast we're moving, it's incredible. Appreciate you so much.
I appreciate it as well, and this is exciting for us too, because typically projects this size are a 5-6 year project, and we're trying to fit it into a 2-year time frame. This is going to be intense, but it's exciting.
We'll see you soon. Thanks, Rob. Thank you so much.
you.
Okay, next we have the contract for the deputy chief.
Okay, so in your package, you have a draft contract for the Deputy Chief of Police. I'll just speak to some of the highlights, and Deputy Chief Rappa is here. It would employ Deputy Chief Rappa, who is our current Deputy Chief. The term of the contract is 2 years, with the contract ending on the last day of March 2025. The compensation is his current pay rate, his current salary. It does outline pay raises that are guaranteed based on his evaluation. It also talks about us maintaining annually the spreads between the rank and file of the union, the deputy chief, and the chief of police. So it's laid out in there. The benefits are the benefits the deputy chief currently has and enjoys. One difference there is item D. The employee will also be permitted use of a city vehicle as a take-home vehicle during employment as deputy chief. Does provide flex time. That policy was adopted in November of 2021. He currently receives those benefits. It outlines several other responsibilities, standard of conduct, termination of the agreement. indemnification. It is our standard contract form. It's basically the same contract that we have with the chief of police. And certainly, I will try to answer any questions, and our attorney did review this several months ago, so legally he can certainly speak to anything.
Okay, are there any questions in regards to this contract for the deputy chief? If not, I'll accept the motion.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to approve the employment contract with the Deputy Chief of Police as presented.
Okay, we have a motion from Councilman Henderson. Is there a second?
Councilman Holland, I'll second that motion.
Councilman Holland seconds. Okay. Are there any questions on the motion? If not, we'll do a roll call vote. Councilman Henderson?
Aye.
Councilman Santos?
Aye.
Councilman Holland?
Aye.
Councilman McCoy?
Aye.
Okay, it's unanimous. Thank you very much. Next, we're going to call up Police Chief Marshal Kraft to go over the speed bumps.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the council, city manager.
Good evening.
Thank you for taking the time to hear me tonight. In conversation with our Public Works Director and city manager, members of the community, our own officers, as well as between a speed study and reviewing crash studies, we do have two recommendations. One is for Nylon Boulevard tonight, and one is for Magnolia. So I do make a recommendation to place 4 sets of permanent speed bumps down Nylon Boulevard. There are some slight changes to that. In order to evenly space out these speed bumps, we believe that we should space them out fairly evenly between just south of Holly Street, north of Locust, between Locust and West Spruce, between West Poplar and Rush Street, and then just south of Pennsylvania Avenue and north of Harrington Street. These speed bumps should space out fairly evenly, and there might be some slight modifications as the Public Works Director begins the asphalt job. I believe it's scheduled here soon in the early spring. The cost of these speed bumps, my understanding, is approximately $1,500 apiece. And if council decides to approve that tonight, then that project would move forward here in the coming weeks, is my understanding. Moving on to Magnolia Drive. I actually have 2 recommendations. The first that you're going to see is the placement of 3 speed bumps down Magnolia. The first would be just south of Arbutus Avenue. The next would be between Arbutus and north of Rose Tree Lane, and then one in the middle between those 2 streets. I have a picture here. It's a little bit harder to see, but you can see that's spaced out fairly evenly. And the reason we're making this in 2 recommendations for council to consider is, 1, we did do a speed study. We actually did several speed studies down Magnolia. It had really the highest concern between what we checked out. We did a speed box placed out on the north side of Magnolia and one down on the southern end. The location on the northern end of Magnolia showed an average speed in low 40 miles an hour range. It's a 15 mile per hour zone. And in the upper 40s on the southern end. We came back and did a 3rd study one more time, and so we have an average of about 43 miles per hour. And if you do an average of the enforcement rate there, depends on which lane, north or south they're traveling in, you're about 60% enforcement rate. Our officers have been out, we've issued citations, but it's all over the city. So in order to be very impactful, we really need to consider putting those speed bumps in there. And also, there's a second recommendation that I'm going to make, but we wouldn't be able to implement that if council chose to do so until after school lets out. My recommendation for this next portion would be between June 15th and August 15th. And that's so that they could set the, the school stops schedule so they could come in off of Atlanta. So this Magnolia Drive was never built with the intention of having that amount of volume of traffic. In about a 1-month period of time, we did a study on about 38,000 vehicles that's coming and going in a 1-month period of time. And so when you look at that volume of traffic, along with the speeds, along with the enforceable, that's 15 miles an hour and above. That enforceable rate goes up as you drop down. So if you were to say anything 9, 10 miles over, that enforcement rate would go up. We tend to look at about a 14, 15 mile an hour speed deviation when we're doing these studies. And so it just depends on if the charges are traveling northbound or southbound, in or out of Bel Air. But that's a lot of traffic. It's too much traffic for that road to handle. It was just made for Woodside Manor back in the day. And I know because I traveled that road for many years back in the mid-'80s when I was dating my wife. You didn't have Crossgate, you didn't have Bel Air. And we've been down there. And what we also did, a traffic study, a crash study. And I just pulled it up again today. And although there's not a ton of traffic crashes there, 5 crashes, 5 of the crashes that occurred in 22 all occurred just north of Crossgate Drive. So that's another telltale sign. It's just too much volume of traffic, and they're coming out of there and they're going too fast. Doesn't matter about enforcement. It's a parking on both sides of the roadway, so it's a very narrow roadway on top of it. And so we're going to recommend that we put a gate with a Knox box for fire, EMS, and police to be able to have access in and out from Magnolia in case there is an emergency. And if the council considers that recommendation and approves that, that wouldn't be able to occur, like I said, until between June 15th or before August 15th. And we would have to let the school district know in advance as well so they could plan their pickup and drop-offs appropriately. And I made a couple notes here. You know, there's been a lot of talk, I think, about development out in Bel Air. There's 116 existing units. There's still another 51 single-family units to be built there, which would have access, although it's off of Atlanta, to go all the way through and back out onto Magnolia. And so those are some concerns. And one of the other things that I noted is there was 4 crashes in 21 versus 5 in 22. But all 5 of the crashes, like I said, were north of Crossgate Drive in 22, whereas only 2 occurred in 21. And you can see because there was more development that occurred, that's a 60% increase in crashes in that particular location, although it's not that many. It's still very concerning, and I think that that's something that the council should consider if we move forward. And any questions?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What type of contingency do you have after this gate is installed? Because there's going to be some traffic that's going to shunt down Arbutus and Crossgate Drive.
Yeah.
Some of it may be temporary until they notice that they can't go and then they choose a better route. But there will be traffic that's going to come down Magnolia and turn left or turn west on either Arbutus or on Crossgate. What kind of contingency do we have for that?
Well, quite frankly, that's one of the reasons that I recommended going ahead to install 3 sets of speed bumps now down there. They could very easily go out Atlanta and go down Stein Highway and go to work traveling east and coming back home, coming west. They could easily try to cut down Magnolia, and they could bypass those 3 sets of speed bumps very easily by going to the right, east to Ivy Drive. I don't think it's realistic for them to go to the left because there's stop signs and there's curves and things of that nature, whereas Ivy kind of loops around. So as a contingency, that's something that we'll have to come back. It's like Sarah, right? You scan, analyze, respond, and assess. There's no perfect answer to square it. We're doing the best we can with speed enforcement, but it's all over the city. It's all over the state. And quite frankly, they're having problems everywhere around the country with people that are just driving too fast. They're using their cell phones. Their crashes continue to go up. And I think the data shows that we've got to do something. I think the best course of action is to place these on Magnolia for now and put that gate up come after school lets out. And yes, the reason we're putting them down Magnolia is because we have a concern that the traffic may very well try to funnel down Crossgate Drive. And if that occurs, then we're going to have to come back to council and have a conversation. But my hope is between now and then, folks will get the message. We'll also hopefully be in a better situation to be able to do more traffic enforcement. And, you know, there's more consequences that come, you know, quite frankly, if that doesn't slow people down.
Okay, other questions from council?
Yes.
Sir.
Hey, Chief, since you took the speed bumps down on Nylon, Has speeding increased or decreased?
We've had two crashes. We've had two crashes there in 2023. I actually have a little bit of study I pulled up on that as well. So on Nylon Boulevard, we had 3 crashes in 21. Not a lot, right? But my biggest concern down Nylon, quite frankly, is the Hooper's Landing, the 5K walk. There's a significant amount of foot traffic, significant amount of bicycle traffic. There's just recreational activity. You've got the pool there. You've got a lot of kids. And so that is a very straight, very wide road. Quite frankly, I've had officers be out there. I just spoke with Sergeant Chambers today. He's been out there multiple times. He was out there just the other day, 45 minutes, not one speeder. Other days, we get speeders. It's hit and miss. But one thing we do know, people speed down that road. And we have people that are more at risk, I think, because of the walking trail there than not. And if we're going to put it down on the southern end, we need to probably spread it out and do the right thing and try to slow that whole pathway down. Now, these are not going to be aggressive speed bumps like they were for the temporary. These are going to be speed bumps meant to slow people down. And my intent is hopefully that it will slow people down and hopefully save lives. We've had 2 pretty serious crashes. One was at 2 o'clock in the morning just recently. It was involving a DUI. If a passenger had been in that car, they'd have probably been killed. But once again, that was an intoxicated subject, 2 o'clock in the morning, no traffic. You know, it's unfortunate.
I have a question maybe Director Mears can answer. When we had the speed bumps on Nylon Boulevard last time, people were going around them on the bike path or in the median. What's the plan this time to stop that?
Well, once we noticed that was happening, we did put up some ballards in the median, so that did stop that from happening. So we would have to put up some ballards wherever we end up locating these new
What
ones.
about the walking paths? Are we gonna extend that speed bump all the way through to the bike path?
The thought was not to, because it could be a tripping type hazard.
Typically, you don't want to.
Right.
But we can certainly extend it over to where it's just as
Up
far
to the
over
line.
and leave the walking path as narrow as possible, so that the best you can do is one tire off the bump.
Right. Yeah.
It is an issue.
I'm not a big fan of speed bumps, but I have to admit, it did work on Nylon Boulevard. I witnessed it myself, but I have enjoyed the time without them. I'll say that. But I do understand we need to do something, and it has had an impact. And I think it's even with them out there, people have slowed down together.
Yeah.
So
There,
yeah.
it's those 2 roads are just 2 unique roads that we have in the city. I mean, Magnolia, obviously, you know, when you got between Crossgate and there, you've got a couple hundred houses you're going to have built,
Yep.
literally here in the near future. And it's just the volume of traffic. No other street that I'm aware of has those types of issues like Magnolia. And Nylon is just, it's a major throughway. So.
okay. All right. If there's no other questions, I'll accept a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to approve the recommendations of the Chief of Police, Marshall Kraft, to install additional speed bumps on Magnolia Drive and Nylon Boulevard and a gate on Magnolia Drive as presented.
Okay. We have a motion from Councilman Henderson. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Councilman Santos seconds. Are there any questions on the motion? Now we'll do a roll call vote. Councilman Henderson?
Aye.
Councilman Santos?
Aye.
Councilman Holland?
Aye.
Councilman McCoy?
Aye.
Okay, it's unanimous. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you, Chief.
Next, we have the approval to sell excess fill material from the Western Sussex Business Campus.
Thank you, Mayor. So in your package, you do have an offer from George and Lynch. They're currently bidding site work for Lot 1, which is being developed by KRM. And that site needs fill to be imported to do what they want to do. So George and Lynch was our contractor on construction of Phase 1. They were aware we had a large stockpile left. I did speak with the Director of Economic Development, the Director of Public Works, and the Director of Electric. We don't necessarily have a need for it, and if it stays, you know, we'll have to move it out. So it's a relatively large fill pile. It's good material. They're offering $5 a ton. So, you know, just doing some back of the napkin math and an estimate, this is $10,000. Should council want to entertain this if they're the successful bidder on the job? I think the other thing, the $10,000 is one thing. It would save our forces from having to move this should we sell the lot and the buyer not want it on the lot.
Okay. All right. Are there any questions in regards to selling the excess fill? Yes, sir.
City manager, you mentioned we would have to move it. Any idea what kind of expense you would talk about in doing this on that?
I mean, I can't, Mr. Mears is here, he can certainly probably speak to it better than I can. We don't have the equipment necessarily like contractors do.
Yeah.
We don't own an excavator, we have a dump truck, we have several dump trucks, but this would take us weeks to
Yeah.
move this, would it not, Mr. Mears?
More to move it than we're gonna make.
Just in the diesel fuel, yeah, so.
10-4, thank you.
Okay. If there are no other questions, then I'll accept the motion.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Holland, I make the motion to approve the offer to sell excess field material left over from the construction of Phase 1 of the Western Sussex Business Campus as presented.
Okay, we have a motion from Councilman Holland. Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
Councilman McCoy seconds. Any question on the motion? Do a roll call vote. Councilman Holland?
Aye.
Councilman McCoy?
Aye.
Councilman Santos?
Aye.
Councilman Henderson?
Aye.
Okay, it's unanimous. All right, next we have the street parking on Spring Street.
Hey, so good evening.
Good
Mayor.
evening.
So what this is the repaving of the parking lot for the 106 Spring Street, the meadery that's coming in. We had a great turnout. We had 7 bids, which is great. So my recommendation is to go with the lowest bidder, Asphalt Maintenance LLC.
Okay, are there any questions in regards to the paving bid? Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Is this a new vendor that we're working with?
Yep, I never worked with them before, but they're out of Salisbury, and he gave me a lot of references, and they have done municipal work.
Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, I'll accept the motion.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Holland, I make the motion to award the bid on 106 Spring Street parking lot paving to Asphalt Maintenance, the low bidder, in the amount of $14,458 as presented.
Okay, we have a motion from Councilman Holland. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second from Councilman McCoy. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, case unanimous. Next, we have Jay's Nest Paving.
Yep, so I do want to go back on the 106 Spring Street. That is funded by, we reallocated some CTF funding that we got from the senators, so that's being paid by them. That's great. So Jay's Nest, we received 9 bids, actually, so to do some additional paving out there. The low bidder did not produce a bid bond. It was required by the bid specifications, so we rejected him, so we went to the next lowest bidder, which again is Asphalt Maintenance LLC.
Okay, are there any questions in regards to paving at the Jay's Nest?
So I got one.
Yes,
So
sir.
are you talking about paving, just repaving what's already there, or?
No, so we're gonna extend the lot.
Okay.
And not the whole thing, but we're gonna extend the lot down before it makes the turn, and then we're gonna restripe the whole parking lot. And again, this is funded by CTF.
How many spaces is that adding? Do you remember?
I do not, off the top
It's
of
a
my head.
lot.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
It's like 4,000 linear feet of
Yeah,
striping, so
it's a good
it's a lot.
size.
Yeah.
It'll help out with the football and everything. Yes, sir.
Just one question. This is just for informational purposes. I see that the top bidder was twice as much as the one as the lowest bidder. I was just wondering, do you have any insight as to why that might be, or they just?
That's what they chose to bid. So, I mean, if you evaluate their bid, you can just see certain things they charge more for than other bidders. Some of them do things in-house, some of them don't, but we had a wide range of bid prices. It
Thank
was
you.
interesting to see. We don't typically get nine bidders on paving, so it was interesting to see all the different ways they did it.
Okay. All right, if there are no other questions, I'll accept the motion.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Holland, I make the motion to award the bid for J Nest paving to Asphalt Maintenance in the amount of $88,000. No?
Sorry.
Yes, sir. Did you stop him?
Well, he said JC paving.
Oh, I thought it said Jay's Nest. Oh, it does say Jay's Nest. I'm sorry.
You want to start
So,
again?
yes, we have to strike that. Thank you, Burley. I'll start all over.
Yes,
Make
sir.
a motion to award the bid for J Nest to Asphalt Maintenance paving in the amount of $88,386 as presented.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Councilman McCoy seconds. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, okay, it's unanimous. And then we have street paving 2023.
So this is our annual street paving that we do every year. And we did get 5 bidders, which is great, more than we usually get. And again, the low bidder met all the specifications, and again, it's Asphalt Maintenance LLC.
Okay. Any questions on this bid? Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
Hey, bro, how big is asphalt, how big is this company? And he took on all 3 of these.
They're pretty big.
Okay.
Like I said, they give me some references, and they've done municipal paving before, so street paving
All right.
before, plus, large lots and
I
things
want to
like
make
that.
sure anybody else more they could chew.
Yeah, well, it helps for them to all mobilize in one time and then be here, have their equipment, and knock them all out, so they competitively bid all 3 of them in hopes to do that. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Have we identified the streets yet that are being paved?
Yes, they're in the bid.
Would you like to know which ones
I
they
would,
are?
I would like to know them, but like the public to know them, yeah.
Okay, I have to pull a bit up because I don't remember all of them off
Oh,
the top of my
sorry to put you on the spot.
Yeah.
I apologize, I thought that was,
No, I just don't have it. It's been a while since I created the bid. Do you want to? Give me 1 second here. It includes the speed humps. It includes, there's some short pieces in Westview here.
so it's not one main project, it's scattered all over the city.
Well, I have some street patching that's scattered throughout. It's like 2,500 square feet of patching.
Okay,
I can get it for you right here. Businesses, street paving. It comes from our great website here, seafordde.com. Yeah, but I got it right here. Yep. Got to be resourceful here, right? Okay, so we have, this also includes the sidewalk on Locust Street that will connect the existing sidewalk to the senior center.
okay.
So it includes that sidewalk work there. It includes Allen Street from Oak Road to Elm, then Elm to Hickory, and Hickory to Sussex. So basically, it's the cross street from Oak Road to Sussex Avenue of Allen Street. The long streets, Oak, Elm, and Hickory, thank you.
Yep.
Were done back during the ARRA project, so they were all done. So these are, now we're going to try to do some cross streets in there.
Okay.
And then this is Phillip Street, Stein Highway to Holly Street. So I'm going to try to do that in phases over the next few years. And then street patching, which like I said is 2,500 square feet of patching throughout the town. And then some speed humps, which are the speed bumps we're talking about.
Okay, Councilman Henderson, did you have a question?
That was my question.
I stole one, all right. Thank you. All right, if there are no other questions, I'll accept the motion.
Councilman Holland, I make the motion to award the bid street paving 2023 to asphalt maintenance. The low bidder in the amount of $118,802.30 as presented.
Okay, we have a motion from Councilman Holland. Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
Councilman McCoy seconds. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, okay, it's unanimous. Thank you, Mr. Mears. Next, we have the Kiwanis Park sign, and Mrs. Newcomer is going to present.
Good evening, Mayor and Council.
Good evening.
As you may or may not remember, we received funding out of the FY23 bond bill appropriation for a digital message board to be placed in replacement of the Kiwanis Park sign in Kiwanis Park that faces Atlanta Road and sort of somewhat catty corner. It captures Atlanta Road and Stein Highway coming eastward. So we put out a bid for that sign. We received 2 bidders, as you can see. The first bid from Tower Signs did not meet our specifications. We actually spoke with them and asked them, could they honor their bid at that price at the correct specifications, and they were not able to do so. So we are recommending the bid go to Phillips Signs in the amount of $37,691.61. We received $50,000 out of bond bill to make this happen, so it's well under bid. It's about a 5 to 6 week lead time on that.
Okay, any questions for Mrs. Newcomer on the Kiwanis Park sign? If not, I'll accept the motion. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion to award the bid for the Kiwanis Park sign to Phillips Signs in the amount of $37,691 with 61 cents as presented.
Okay, we have a motion from Councilman Santos. Is there a second?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Holland, I second that
Okay,
motion.
Councilman, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, okay, it's unanimous. Thank you very much. And then next we have mosquito control services.
Yeah, so council has in their package correspondence that we receive from the state mosquito control branch of the government, and this is an annual thing that typically gets done. I have signed this in the past administratively. We are bringing this back to city council just to make them aware. We traditionally do this. We traditionally recommend that we get this done so that we receive these services from the state. It is aerial application traditionally. I will try to answer any questions that council might have.
Any questions for the city manager on mosquito control? Yes, sir.
I noticed at the bottom of the letter, it requested an answer by Monday, March 13th. Did you communicate with them an extension, or?
We did not. We'll get it out to them immediately tomorrow morning. We have all the letters written. The city clerk did it. We'll give it to them ASAP.
All right.
Any other questions in regard to the mosquito spraying? If not, I will accept the motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion to approve the execution of the municipality endorsement for mosquito control services with the Delaware Mosquito Control section of the 2023 season as presented.
Okay, we have a motion from Councilman Santos. Is there a second?
Councilman Holland, I second that
Okay,
motion.
thank you very much. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, thank you. And then we will communicate when that time begins and they start their
They
sprinkler.
notify us, yes, sir.
Yep, okay. Okay, on to old business and the changes to section 7. We're going to let City Solicitor Griffith run with this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, council
Good to see
members.
Good evening.
This was on the agenda at the last council meeting, so I was not privy to that discussion. I'm happy to be here tonight. I hope I don't reiterate too much what's already been discussed. This is a proposed change to the charter regarding voting rights in the city. The previous provisions in the charter gave voting rights to individuals who resided in the city and who owned property in the city, restricted to male or female natural persons. The state of Delaware allows municipalities to permit businesses, artificial entities, limited liability companies, corporations to vote as well. It is a trend where municipalities want to grant to companies as a form of economic development and participation in the democratic process in the city a way, an incentive to participate. We sort of modeled the proposed language off the charter in Fenwick Island. I'm familiar with their council members, and it seems to work well there. So we modified the language in the charter to allow property owners, whether they are individuals or artificial entities, to also vote in the municipal elections. It's whenever you grant voting rights, it's kind of a line drawing process. You try to have to figure out where do you want to draw the line for voting rights. Here it seemed to be for economic development purposes and for the way the trends are going purposes, and the fact that the state of Delaware permits it for our municipality, advisable to allow business owners to allow voting rights to individuals who have chosen to reside in the city and businesses who do business and own property in the city. So that seemed to be where the line was natural. If you've invested enough in the city to live here or to own a business, own property here, you have voting rights. So that was the purpose of the proposed amendment. It's relatively minor language change, but that's the proposal.
One of the questions that came up last time we looked at this was we allow people who rent homes, who live in the Seaford, to vote. Why wouldn't we allow those who rent or lease building space to vote?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think my answer would be twofold. The first would be where you draw the line in terms of investment in the city. People who choose to live here, people who own businesses here, have a little greater investment than people who rent property here, whether residential or commercial. And perhaps a bigger reason is I've seen in litigation, there's a lot of disputes about where there are leases and tenancies, both commercial and residential, as to whether or not a lease is in effect anymore or a lease has been terminated, disputes between the property owner and the person leasing. And it would be a real practical difficulty, I believe, to try to figure out voter registration if you have a dispute between a landlord and a tenant concerning whether or not this lease has been terminated or not. I don't know how the city could figure out a way to know who has the right to register on behalf of that lessee when there's a dispute concerning whether the lease is going on or not. So both for, I think, policy purposes and for practical purposes, drawing the line at people who own property and live here is probably the right way to go.
Okay. Are there any questions for the city solicitor in regards to this? Councilman Henderson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A general comment. I see I agree with your interpretation. Because the hazard I see is, suppose somebody other than, say, the UPS store or someone else, they lease space with post office boxes in them. And a business owner runs a business out of a P.O. box that's in a leased space, and all it is a drop box. I see a vulnerability there where this person who rents a 1 cubic foot mailbox under a lease gets a chance to vote. And I see that vulnerability. So I see that as being a problem. What I'm also a proponent of is I don't see any structural differences between this right to vote for people than a business that has a right to vote, a business or a property owner, a commercial property owner that has a right to vote in one of our special elections for a referendum. I don't notice any difference because right now a corporation can appoint a power of attorney to vote in a tax issue or in a referendum for borrowing. So I'm in favor of that. That puts corporations on an even par. And I don't believe that the choice of your corporate structure should determine whether you can vote or not, because a sole proprietorship, someone who owns a property, a commercial property as a sole proprietorship, gets to vote because they own it outright in their own name. But someone who has an LLC or someone who has an S Corp or a C Corp can't. I see that as not fair. So I'm in favor of your interpretation, and I think it puts us on par. It puts real estate owners on par with the other voting tenants that they already enjoy in the city.
Okay. Other questions for the city solicitor, Councilman Santos?
Yeah, I have a couple questions. One of the questions is, what training would the city staff have to be able to vet that the people that are coming forward with their power of attorneys or certificates saying that they own the property and the business? Like, what training would they have to have?
No training beyond understanding when the power of attorney is presented to them, just looking at it and seeing that's the person entitled to vote. You know, there's not a whole lot of vetting that goes on. There's no vetting for a corporation that would go on beyond the vetting that goes on for an individual. If the corporation or entity is registered to vote, once the registration process is done, then it's no different from an individual having already been registered coming in to vote. So there wouldn't be any, I don't believe there'd be any additional training necessary.
And I'll just add, if I might, all of our staff, our city clerk, several others, our director of economic development, they've received the state training for election purposes. I've received it. They can also cross-reference. When we do this, we're going to register them in the book of registered voters. They can cross-reference with Sussex County tax land records. And then any questions they have, anything that causes them concern or pause, obviously, the city solicitor is available to us to guide us. And we currently, and we have been accepting power of attorneys for many, many years in our code department for people that file for variances or plan reviews on behalf of, so you might not own the property that you want to buy and build a McDonald's on, but you get a power of attorney from that person, and that allows you to go through our process. So we have some familiarity in our organization with what a power of attorney looks like, so on and so forth.
Thank you. Another question that I have is, what happens if there is an LLC with multiple owners? So is it first come, first serve, or is it if one wants to vote for one person and someone wants to vote for another person, who gets to say who gets to vote?
So for any artificial entity, whether it's an LLC or an LLP or a corporation, the company appoints one person to have the power of attorney for that entity. So it's really up to the management of that entity. So for an LLC, it would be probably the managing member who has the voting rights, who would have the power of attorney. But that managing member may say, I want this John Doe to have our power of attorney, or I want our lawyer to have our power of attorney. So it would be up to the individual entity to decide who the representative is for voting purposes.
Thank you. One other question. So, and this is in regards to, I believe I see some vulnerabilities here for, I see the potential to see voter fraud. So right now, citizens vote for the people they want to represent them, right? Is that federal law?
It is local, state, and federal law.
Okay. So if, and right here it says, and right now, a person that is not a citizen can own real estate, they can own property, commercial, residential, and a person that is not a citizen can own an LLC, an S corp, they can own these entities. And the way that this is written, I see that this could be a way for someone to go around and own real estate that is not own real estate and own an LLC or a company, and issue a power of attorney to someone that is a citizen and have them vote on their behalf.
If I understand what you're saying, is that it would be somebody who would not otherwise qualify to vote, but becomes qualified to vote because they're appointed power of attorney by a business.
Yes, because I understand that if I issue power of attorney and I don't have the right to vote, that the person that I'm appointed the power of attorney should not either. But if the people that are vetting this, they don't need to have any sorts of training or need to see anything other than a power of attorney, then how are we going to vet them and make sure that the people are allowed to vote?
Yeah, I think the provision in Fenwick Island and the provision here would provide for only individuals who would otherwise be permitted to vote could have the power of attorney.
And how would that go about? Because the staff that's going to be vetting this, I don't know if they're going to have the training. I've been working with certain real estate deals where there are trusts, there are LLCs, there are beneficiaries. It's all there's a whole web, and it's taking myself, my broker, our real estate attorney. It's not such a simple process.
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think that it would be up to the staff to make sure that the person who has the power of attorney has the right to vote independently.
And I think I'm going to lean on the city clerk because she's here. In our book of registered voters, we have a statement they have to make that states they swear or affirm they are eligible to vote and a legal citizen, correct? So that's what we do for anybody. You have to swear and affirm. So that's what we do.
It's a good question.
And we have forms where it says, hey, I'm not going to sue anybody, but at the end of the day, people still sue people all the time. So.
Yeah, no, I get it, and I think that's one of the hazards you have with individuals. Might not be who they are, who they represent themselves to be, but it's no different. This process would be no different for an entity than it would be for an individual. You have that hazard in any case. I don't think it would be any greater for an entity than it would be for an individual.
I'll finish with this. I think that I don't think that this is a right versus wrong thing. I think that what the mayor's trying to do is the right thing. There are stakeholders that are investing a lot of money in this city, and So it would be great, but at the same time, it's not a right versus wrong. It's a right versus right issue that we're dealing with here, which just makes it very complicated. If we vote yes on this, I want to make sure that everybody's clear that we're opening the doors, to potential voter fraud, and the person that's going to be the person drawing the line is going to be city staff, where it's going to. We should. That's just my 2 cents.
Councilman Henderson, you had another
I want to
question,
double dip
comment?
if I could. Since we have legal counsel here, is there a requirement that the corporation or the artificial entity be in good standing with the state of Delaware at the time of the election?
It's not in the charter. The charter does not say that, no.
So
Only that it be a domestic entity. We could put in a good standing requirement.
I would highly recommend that, because you could have a corporation that's delinquent and not a good citizen, and they could come in and vote in an election.
It's a good point.
That is one more comment there.
Can citizens currently vote if they're delinquent?
I believe they can. We don't go that far.
That's correct. That would be the tricky.
And again, we don't want to be perceived as taking away anyone's basic fundamental right to vote. That is something that we cherish, we hold dear. We allow them to vote in that circumstance. We do have a good standing ordinance that, we won't provide that corporation a service, but in this instance, we would allow them to vote.
In that vein, you have good standing with the city, but if you're an artificial entity, you are beholden to the Delaware Department of State to be in good standing. And economic good standing with the city, like being delinquent in electric bills, does not disqualify a voter from voting. But if you're delinquent and you don't pay your franchise tax and you end up not being a corporation at all,
You can't vote.
you're not a corporation if you're not in good standing until you get there. So you're not really an artificial entity if you're not in good standing with the state. So how can you claim that you're an entity that's qualified to vote if you're not in good standing? And it takes quite a bit to get to that good standing.
I don't know that I would agree you're not a corporation if you're delinquent on your
Well,
state
it doesn't
dues.
unincorporate you, but
Right.
you shouldn't be conducting business if you're not in good standing in the state or in the city where you're at.
In some ways, you're not permitted to conduct business.
Right. Councilman McCoy?
So I want to pose a real life scenario. Okay. So if I own 20 properties in the city, I live in the city, I get one vote.
Correct.
I live here. If I own 20 businesses here in the city of Seaford, I would get one vote. However, depending upon the alignment of my business, I could use power of attorney for the other 19 businesses and have 19 other individuals vote in the city election who don't live here. They may not even work here. It could be on a Zoom call, and it could be outside the state, and they would still be able to vote in a city election. Am I interpreting that correctly?
That's how the law in all jurisdictions that have businesses voting work.
That's my major issue. That's my major problem with this, is that we start walking down Pandora's box with this, and I agree in principle and concept that people who own businesses should own the right to vote as much as anybody else. They decided to put their business in Seaford, and I want them to have a vote. But that's been my concern since the onset, is that this opens the door to voter manipulation and voter fraud. However unlikely, this could be an unintended consequence of going down this path, and I'm afraid that would sway elections. And this call a spade is that if somebody owns a property, or owns a business rather, and they have a power of attorney, I'm sure they're telling people, hey, you should vote for Brian and Rich. And that's the problem I have with this. So, again, it could be an unlikely scenario. I understand there's more complications how to set the businesses up, but it is possible by opening up this door.
It's, we currently, if a non-resident property owner owns 20 properties, they only get one vote.
If a non-resident property owner owns 20 properties, they get one vote.
Right. So is there a way to protect against something like that? That if someone owns 19 different businesses, that they would not be allowed to identify 19 different voters?
So if you change the language to, instead of saying you have to live or work in the, you have to live or own property in the city, and you can be an artificial entity if you own property in the city. If you change the language to non-resident property owners, then you really narrow down the category of people it would apply to. Because in Mr. McCoy's scenario, all of those 19 businesses would have to be located in the city, but have their principal place of business somewhere else. And I think that's surpassingly unlikely, because I would think that if an individual lives in the city and has a business in the city that owns property in the city, that person, the main office of that business is somewhere outside the city. I don't know if we, I'd be shocked if that scenario arises. So that's how you would limit a business owner who is also an individual in the city. If you require that the vote be from a non-resident business owner, then you could pretty much eliminate it.
Councilman Santos, you still have a question?
Yeah, but going off of Councilman Henderson's comment, I've worked with some real estate deals where the LLC was able to buy and sell real estate, but I've also worked with LLCs where they were not able to sell the property because they had not paid their taxes, so they were not in good standing. They could not perform as an entity. We've run into those issues. We ran into this issue not too long ago with a property here in Maryland. This was not even a month ago. We've also worked here in Seaford, in Delaware, but that's going off what he was saying. And with Councilman Matt McCoy's scenario, if someone does own properties in different entities, someone could own a house under trustee of Pine Street, Easy Voting Solutions S Corp, Seaford LLC Deals, Seaford Deals LLC, all these different names. I believe they could issue power of attorney to different people, and then who's the one that's deciding? Ashley or Tricia? I don't think it's fair to put that burden on them.
Well, I think if the requirement is a non-resident property owner, I think that eliminates that issue. Because you're going to have somebody who lives in the city, and that individual has his own vote. And then in order to have him be able to vote on behalf of a business, only non-residents who own businesses in the city can vote. Because if you're an individual who owns a business in the city, you only get your individual vote. You have to be a non-resident property owner to vote on behalf of the property. So if you could follow that. So you're not going to have a situation where there's an individual living in the city who's also got 19 businesses in the city. That person gets one vote because he lives here. If you change it to non-resident property owner, you really wipe out that scenario where you would have an individual living here who also has businesses here and starts assigning votes to those businesses. He doesn't get any, he's a resident, so his businesses don't get separate votes. You have to be a non-resident property owner. And in that case, and I don't know if there's many non-resident property owners that don't also, that have a business here that don't also live here, but if you change the language of the code to non-resident property owners and include businesses in that scenario, you don't have the scenario Mr. McCoy raised.
Yeah, it certainly gets complicated. It's, I think the intent of this change was to allow those individuals, and in my experience in the last 10 years, it's been less than a dozen people that have asked to vote that are long-term Seafordians that have lived here have invested hundreds of thousands of dollars, but they live literally a mile or two outside city limits. They still live in Seaford, but they've invested in their business, and they've not been able to vote. And it's one vote, it's not very complicated. Maybe naively, I've missed all these side avenues this all could go down. I never thought or even think that a franchise, a national franchise, is going to appoint people to vote in our local elections. I don't believe that would ever happen. I don't think that's, the people that are interested in voting are going to make some effort to come up and do this, and those are typically your local people. But did you have another question or comment, Mr. McCoy?
Yeah, just one more, just from my own knowledge, I guess. So, if the non-resident property owner lives outside the city, but they own 20 businesses in the city, they can still appoint 20 different people for power of attorney to vote in the city election, in theory.
If those businesses have residences in the city, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's still.
They would have to be their principal place of business in the city while the individual lives outside the city.
Yeah, that's where I still struggle with, is that people are basically appointing other people to vote in a city election, and they could manipulate those votes. Again, I agree in principle with the concept of people who own businesses. They go to their job every day in City of Seaford, and the work here should vote. No question about it. I'm afraid that people are going to take this and twist it, and we'll have a problem. That's my only concern.
Just to ask the question of the attorney, the way we administer the good standing ordinance right now and the way the ordinance reads, we are allowed to do a cursory investigation so that if it's part of if you're part of an umbrella corporation where the corporations are I'm going to use the wrong words here, commingled, or if I'm just the president of it, we catch those in the good standing. So we do searches, and we know our residents and our business owners well enough to where we get a large portion of that. Just because the name has changed, if I still am the entity, we catch them in that net 90% of the time. Is there language or process policy whereby when we sign people up, we can do something very, very similar? The premise here is one person, one vote. You own the business, you get one vote. If you do have a scenario where you own multiple properties, and I understand it, you could have, especially with real estate, you might have it in a separate LLC in case something happens. But if we require you as part of the process of registration to swear and affirm that you are voting for all your LLCs and all your entities, is that a legal construct that would work?
Yeah, the term would be related entities. So if you have a shell corporation at the top, you have a couple corporations that do different types of business, but there's overlapping ownership for all of them, they're all considered related entities. And we could put language in there that an artificial entity and its related entities are entitled to one vote. So we could do that. For Mr. McCoy's point, it would have to be for somebody who lives outside the city but owns property in the city. It would have to be unrelated entities, all of whom own property in their own individual name, not under one umbrella. So all of these 19 businesses would have to own property in the city and be unrelated to each other, and have the person in charge of those businesses live outside the city. And I don't know if that scenario is realistic under the, I'm not a city resident, I don't know how often that happens, but I would imagine it's unlikely.
And I'd have to look at the database to see. I've never done any kind of analysis on that to see, how many of these exist. I truly don't know.
Yep.
Yeah, that would be
Councilman
my
Santos.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think we need to be very careful with this because we are a small city with big city problems, and we often take ordinances from other different cities and other different states. And when we do this, we're the biggest city in Sussex County, so a lot of times other cities pay attention, they follow, and I think we can make it so that other people around, other cities around other states as well. You know, like, hey, this passed in Seaford must be okay. But here we might not see a lot of voter, but we can cause this, to spread. So I think this is a vulnerable. That's all.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Mr. Charles, before we go further on this, you can pull up from that scenario, how many fall underneath that umbrella?
We could try. Yeah,
Would it be hard or would it be too complicated?
I don't know.
Okay.
You know, we would have to look at commercial properties, because this doesn't, as I understand it, this doesn't apply for, necessarily residentials. It's LLC.
Right.
I guess unless you own a duplex or a rental unit in an LLC, it could apply to that, I assume. So we'd have to look at that database and who owns what. I mean, just kind of knowing the business community as we do, there are a few business owners that own several properties. I don't know any that own 20.
I
But would have one vote still.
Yeah.
As long as it was written correctly, if that,
Right.
It still would just have one vote.
Oh, what, okay.
Yeah.
because you had the person that owned PK Restaurant, also owned the furniture store at one
Right.
time, and he owns a property out on Route 13.
Reynolds.
So that's one that I know that had several properties at one time. Don't know how they were formed as far as, were they different LLCs, or was it under, Anderson Enterprises, which I think is the way it was held. We'd have to look at the database and try to see if we could kind of call those numbers out, but we can make an attempt at it.
Yes, sir.
So my concern might be ultimately much ado about nothing. So I just rather double check, and if we do want to add any verbiage to the document to be included in the motion, at the current iteration, we would have to table this currently. Is that a point of order inquiry?
Yeah, so again, we're not in any kind of rush to get this done. This
Okay.
does not impact any election upcoming. This is, the intent of this is to allow businesses that are invested in our community, or truly Seafordians that live here that want to take an interest, to vote in these elections. This would have to go to our representative and our senator up for a charter change. This would be a next year kind of thing, but it was an opportunity to increase voter turnout for people that are investing money in our city. Are there unethical people out there that are going to create 19 different, I guess there are some of those people out there. I guess I'm fortunate I don't hang out with a lot of them. So, but the intent was to capture those local people that typically own one business, that have an interest in voting in these elections, that have bought businesses downtown, or that are in our industrial parks, that have a passion to see Seaford do well and want to be a part of the process. So, but yes, if there's language you want to see tweaked, changed, or we want to give it back to Solicitor Griffith to come back, we certainly can do that. We would need a motion to table it and bring it back if that's what the council chooses.
If I could just jump in on that, I believe it might have been Councilman Henderson who brought this up probably a year or so ago. Just under Robert's Rules of Order, when you use the word table something, you're required to do it at the next meeting. It would just be postponed.
Okay. Would we then, Robert's Rules, vote to postpone it?
Vote to postpone.
Thank you. I want to make sure I'm right now. So are there any other questions while we have our city solicitor here at the table tonight? If not, I'll accept the motion.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to postpone this item for future business while language is changed to the ordinance.
Okay, so we have a motion to postpone to allow time to change the language to cover some of the things we discussed.
Pardon me, to the charter change, not the ordinance.
Yes, sir. Okay. Is there a second to the motion? We gotta go it this way, brother.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, are there any questions on the motion? Yes, sir.
One question for the city solicitor. Given the time do you think you'd be able to find something that would be able to give businesses the right to to vote, but at the same time protect, make sure not just leave it to the faith of the people, leave it to and leave it to their goodwill. Make guarantee that we can protect the integrity of our elections.
What we can do is make sure that voting by an artificial entity has the same level of integrity as voting by an individual. I can't guarantee every individual is going to vote with integrity any more than I can to the extent that an entity is. But the goal is to have the same level of scrutiny for an artificial entity voting as we do for an individual voting.
But it could go through.
It could go. I will tell you, in my head, there's.
Well, let me rephrase this.
There's a scenario that I'm going back and forth in how I get language to address,
because I know this was me just, I looked at this. I don't have much time to look at it, right? We get this. We look at it for 1 week or 2 weeks, at a time. But if someone hired you or hired one or two attorneys, would we be able to get that attorney to find a way to circumvent and commit voter fraud?
I don't think anybody could
make LLCs, do different shells, if that's, because the attorney works for the buyer or whoever's paying for them. Like, if you represent the city of Seaford, I'm asking, given the time, can you protect the integrity of elections?
No.
Okay.
I can draft language in a charter or an ordinance or in any other document that protects the city to the greatest extent possible from an individual trying to commit fraud. I can't prevent, just like the chief of police can't stop people from committing crime, I can't draft language that's going to stop people from trying to vote in ways that they're not permitted to.
In that case, Mr. Mayor, I would like to make a second motion because I don't want to see this come forward again. But
We have a motion on the table, so we have to vote on this motion. The motion was to postpone and was seconded by Councilman McCoy. Are there any more questions on the motion? Okay, with that, I'll do a roll call vote. Councilman Henderson?
Aye.
Councilman Santos?
no.
Councilman Holland?
Aye.
And Councilman McCoy?
Aye.
Okay, so this motion will be postponed. Solicitor Griffith will bring back some language or send us some language that we will then circulate out to everybody before the next council meeting and or whenever he gets it done, whether it's the next one or the following one, and we'll bring it back for another vote.
And we will do our best to try to answer Councilman Holland's question about how often this might occur, would possibly occur.
Okay. Very good. All right, next we have the second reading of the ordinance to amend Chapter 5 around rental licenses and regulate nuisance properties.
Good evening.
Mr. Bailey.
Good evening, Mr. Bella.
So I'm presenting the second reading of ordinance 2023-01, Chapter 5, by adding Section 549, nuisance property, to the rental license ordinance. Just to go over ordinance again for you. This is to apply to any rental unit that violates the provisions of the City of Seaford Code or create any criminal nuisance violations 3 times within a 12-month period. They'll be deemed a nuisance property. We'll notify the violations to the owner of record via certified mail. After a rental unit is deemed a nuisance property, all of their fees and fines defined in this chapter will be tripled for a term of 5 years. So their rental license fees, their inspection fees, late fees, anything applies to their rental license will be tripled for the 5 years. If the violations continue during that 5-year term, we will revoke the rental license and condemn it to be unoccupied for a minimum of 1 year. The designation of nuisance property will only be removed under the end of that 5-year term, or if they sell the property to a new owner. And they have a right to appeal these actions as outlined in this article.
Okay. As council remembers, this was something that was brought up in our planning session that we have talked about, again, to not only protect our citizens, but to protect homeowners and their values as a way to deal with some of these properties that we continually have problems with. So, are there any questions or regards to this second reading? Councilman Santos.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, you went over the intent right now of the ordinance, but can we also talk about how this gives the city the power to, to address the nuisance properties?
We'll work with the police department and our code department to identify properties that generate these violations or criminal act nuisance calls. And we're still working on a process with the chief now to get a report weekly or monthly on known issues. And just internally, we had discussions on like the code violations, what would trigger a strike, so to say. Like if we have to send someone a grass letter, we send hundreds of those a year. Just doing one letter, that's all they get notified for in a year, I wouldn't qualify it as a strike. If they get the letter, they ignore the letter, and we have to send a crew out there to cut the grass, I'd quantify that as a strike. Same thing if we have to go clean up trash. Just getting the violation notice, they'll give them a chance to correct the violation, but if we have to send a crew out, that'd be a strike. Now the criminal aspect of it, we still have to some work to do on that with the chief to determine what will qualify. It'd have to be something pretty serious. We're not going to take any petty complaints or anything like that. Ambulance calls are out, but it has to be something serious, and the chief and I will work that out.
So, another question. So, right now, do we have a list of violations and strikes that would qualify, or we're still working on those?
Yeah, that's administrative, but we need to get this in place, and then we can develop those policies and procedures that the code department and the police department will act within.
Okay, I'm glad we have the city solicitor present because I might have a question for him in a second. But the city of Laurel has a similar ordinance to this, and I like this ordinance because I like both ordinances. But with the ordinance that we have right now at the table before us, letter D is, I believe, is a little bit too steep and a little bit too harsh. We as a government should not put someone in a position to force their home. If right here it says, if violation, well, let me just go to I'll read it all. If violations under subsection A of this section continue during the 5-year term, the owner's rental license should be revoked for the subject rental unit, and the rental unit will be condemned and unoccupied for a minimum of 1 year. So, with the way this is written, if a property is condemned and unoccupied for 1 year, it could force someone that is a landlord to sell the property because they no longer can make payment on their mortgage. Or they might have to be forced onto a short sale where they sell the property at a loss, or the bank allows it to be sold at a loss because, well, payments can no longer be made. And this could happen if it's during a good market, if houses are selling fast for a good price and they're making a profit, great. Or if they're breaking even, great. But if they could be upside down on their mortgage and they could end up losing money and they could be put in a position where it's financially ruinous. I like that this gives the city of Seaford the power to go out there and try to help make the streets safer, if these properties are being, okay, let me rewind a little bit. The Laurel has a very similar ordinance. It's under license applications, section 9212, and I'll read it out loud. The town manager may withhold the issuance of mercantile license for the failure to pay the annual fee and for lawful reasons, including the right to withhold a license from any property owner for a commercial property where the occupants or users or the persons in lawful possession of such property have been convicted on 3 or more occasions of a violation of the ordinance defining and regulating disorderly commercial establishments and dwelling houses. Chapter 102, Article 9, as amended during the previous calendar year or 3 years or more violations within a 12-month period of the rental inspection program and/or rental license provision. In such event, the town may withhold the issuance of a mercantile license for up to 3 years or until the persons entitled to lawful possessions of the subject property have voluntarily surrendered possession or have been evicted from the subject property pursuant to the order of a court of competent jurisdiction, whichever first occurs. So I like this language because a lot of the problems, at times it's the tenants that are the problem. I like this ordinance, a mixture of this ordinance, because it would give the city the opportunity to go out there and condemn property and shut down utilities, make sure that the tenants are evicted. But the way the Laurel has done it, it doesn't punish the owner of the properties. They have a separate ordinance for nuisance properties that targets everybody across the board, not just rental properties. Okay, so they have it separately, and that's under Ordinance 2021. But so I would like to table this. The reason I went through all this, so that you guys know why I'm trying to table this, so that we can give the staff some opportunity to review the ordinance that Laurel has and change the wording on this one. I want the city of Seaford to be able to have the authority and power to protect our constituents, but I don't want to put pressure on owner into selling the house.
Are you making a motion?
I
Yeah.
think there should be some more time for questions and debate on the issue.
Okay, do you have a question, sir?
I do.
Okay.
My interpretation of subsection A is that this is criminal. And my interpretation of tall grass and trash is that is civil.
It would be
Is
a
that correct?
combination of both.
I mean, the police aren't going to come out and write a criminal citation out for trash or for tall grass. It's going to be a civil matter that you're going to,
Correct.
that you or your department is going to handle, right?
Right.
So the way I read criminal nuisance is if the police have been up there on criminal matters.
Yeah, this will address both sides. So if we have code violations while also having criminal nuisance violations on the same property, we could give them the 3 strikes.
Well,
It'll be rare, but it could happen.
That's not particularly spelled out here.
I think your reading of it is correct.
As a civil matter.
I think your reading of it is correct. And just to ask the question, when we condemn for boarding houses or things of that nature, we would that is a civil matter, but it could rise to criminal, but it has to be very extreme case. Is that not correct?
Yeah, it would have to present a threat to the safety of either the people living there or people around there.
Which we do in condemnations, like if we find unsafe, unsanitary conditions, we order an eviction in sometimes 5, sometimes 10 days because it is unfit for human habitation. But again, that by law statute, that is a civil violation. Is that correct?
It depends on how the municipality wants to treat it. Typically, if you can treat it civilly, you could define it as a crime.
Okay, so it depends on what court that you file the, okay.
Right.
I don't know if that answers your question. Some of these code violations do rise to the level of criminal conduct. But I do agree with you. A grass violation is not a criminal issue that we look at. These have to be relatively large things. And what we've always talked about, this really is to address a very small percentage of our properties.
Right. So, follow-up question. Mr. Santos alludes to the town of Laurel. Can you attribute this language to any other city, or is this drafted as an original draft?
Mostly original. We did some research. Georgetown has a very similar program, that they actually pay into, you know, that's a fine, really, they pay into, and they want to get out, they can pay a larger fine to get out. Use some of that language. I'm not sure if we looked at Laurel's or not.
Let me understand this, they could buy out,
I believe so. I believe that's the way Georgetown's is written.
they could
Pay
They could pay
fee,
to get-
you know, to get removed from the.
removed from the list. Well, I'm happy that that's not in this
Right.
Right.
ordinance.
And again, I think we need to stress that this, 95% of our landlords are looking at this, and this does not impact them at all. So this is a small percentage of our rental property. Councilman McCoy?
I want to pose another scenario. So you have a landlord tenant. There have been 2 violations. Landlord comes to you, the city, and says, I know I got a problem here with this tenant. Our agreement stipulates I can't get rid of them for 60 days, hypothetically. Something in their agreement, their contract. I'd love for them to leave, but I have to give them this certain amount of time. They're communicating that to you. Within that same time, comes the 3rd violation. Does the city have the communication and the operation in place to continue to work with that landlord, say, I knew I had a problem, I want to let you know I'm working with you guys to fix this, but they had the 3rd violation in that window?
Unique situation,
Yeah.
we could work with someone like
Okay.
that. Yeah, if their line of communication was open and, you know, they were being
I
honest.
just wonder about situations where the landlord's hands might be tied contractually to that tenant.
Right.
They know they have an issue, they want to get out of it, and they are communicating, hey, you guys want us to fix this, we want to fix too.
Mhm.
I'd like to see some opportunity for them to do that with the city, if they're committed to improving the property.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Santos?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So over last week, I had a settlement, so I had the opportunity to talk to a real estate attorney, and then and I brought the ordinance that was being brought up, so they could see. And I had another settlement this week that I had with a different real estate attorney office, and they, you know, same thing. I had the opportunity to be in front of them, and I thought, hey, I'm gonna ask him what he thinks about this. One of them was going to come for public comment. They weren't able to make it. They said they were going to email us what their thoughts were. The other one is the one that at point kind of referenced me to the city of Laurel, because they said that was you know, that was something that he was familiar with, and it was, you know, it seemed to be a good thing and work. When I showed him this one, he said, yeah, I'm not really sure that this is legal, and it could potentially be challenged. That's why I'm glad that he's here. You know, there is a Delaware landlord-tenant code, and which is Delaware law. We cannot supersede it as a city. But over here, the way that Laurel has it written, it says, until the person entitled to lawful possession of the subject property, which would be the tenant, has voluntarily surrendered possession or been evicted from the subject property pursuant to the court or order of a court of competent jurisdiction, whichever comes first. So I think this one over here protects, you know, us from getting sued, and I think it's offering the city the power to do what they're trying to do. So I would. I also have that was yesterday with that attorney. I tried to reach out Laurel, the code department, and the town manager, kind of to see how it's worked out for them. I have an email here. I don't know if you want me to read all of it, or if I can just kind of summarize it.
Summarize.
Okay. So there's a property that they've used this ordinance against. It's they said it's great on paper for many of the properties that are occupied, but the biggest problem with some of the properties that fall under this ordinance is that they are vacant, and people walk away from them, and that the bank still pays the taxes, and you know, just because they don't transfer the name sometimes, and so we have vacant properties. And I think that compounds the problem. You know, if we don't want vacant properties, just around our city that just, that brings, I think that brings more problems, squatters, vacancies, more nuisance. So that's
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Yes, sir.
I'm interested in what Councilman McCoy had to say regarding stopping the clock. Supposing, hypothetically, you have a landlord who is apprised that there's 2 strikes because police have been up there on egregious criminal charges, not domestic charges, but drug charges, gun charges, some other charges. So that the landlord takes action and gives them a notice of eviction. There's you of all people in the city know that there is due process, right? So maybe he is on a 60-day notice to get out. Is that 60 days or 45 days?
It depends.
Okay,
But
so
yeah, it's a long time.
So in the intervening time, within that 60 days, he's been served an eviction notice and he gets another criminal action. The way this is drawn, he could be disqualified from renting his property once he gets them out. So
what I would say to address that, this is clear. F talks about any person aggrieved by action taken from this section may appeal such as outlined in section 5 or 4.5. So the appeal process is, it would come to the city manager, and so that would be a period where we could talk with them, we could find out what's going on, what actions have you taken, and then we could potentially prescribe some actions, okay? If that person that was still aggrieved, it then comes to city council, okay? That's kind of the end of the road here. So you can present evidence at an open meeting, it'll be on an agenda. Council has sat in that situation before with people where the building official has condemned houses, and they've come here and appealed that, and council has considered that. This would be similar in that fashion. And the building official and I have talked about it. One of the things that he's done most recently, we have a problem with boarding houses. So as an example, he worked out something with the property owner that he's going to inspect monthly. He's going to go in there and make sure no locks are on the door. It's as he said for a period of time. We can work out arrangements like that. So if they're making good faith effort to evict the person, and it's not just, from going to me on the lease to my girlfriend on the lease, then we would be willing to discuss that and try to, as long as the property owner, this is my opinion, as like with any code, as long as the property owner is taking an active role in managing, maintaining, and keeping his property to standard, we're going to work with them. It's when they don't is when we want to make positive change for
And it's
the
where we
neighbors.
have the problem.
That's where we have the
And
problem.
that's where our community is demanding we do something.
Yes, but again, we're willing to look at any of this language.
Right. Okay, any other questions for Mr. Bailey or our city solicitor? If not, I'll accept a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I think the intent is good, and I think this ordinance is okay, but I think it can be better, and I would like to direct the city manager to review other languages and implement them and bring it back forward. So I would like to make a motion to table this for further discussion.
Okay, we have a motion to table. Is there a second? Okay, the motion fails. I'll accept another motion.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to approve the ordinance to amend Chapter 5, Article 4, rental licenses of the Municipal Code, Seaford, Delaware, relating to businesses that would define and regulate nuisance properties in the city of Seaford as presented.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
Okay, we have a second from Councilman McCoy. Are there any questions on the motion? If not, we're going to do a roll call vote. Councilman Henderson?
One question on the motion. For the city solicitor, Mr. Griffith, so I've had one attorney tell me that the way that this was written might be challenged, that they didn't think this was legal. Do you have anything to say to letter D where it says, to letter D, where it says if violations, because they were okay with everything else. They thought it was good. But this one, it says if violations under subsection A of this section continue during the oh, he's reading it.
Okay, thanks. I understand the question. I don't know what specifically the other attorney believed might be unenforceable. When I read this ordinance, and I have no position on policies, that's what everybody on council is elected for. My only opinion would be whether or not a Delaware court would enforce this if it was challenged. And when I read this language, I don't see anything in this proposed ordinance that would be stricken by a Delaware court. It looks enforceable to me.
Thank you.
Okay, we've had a motion and a second. All right. Councilman Henderson?
Aye.
Councilman Santos?
No.
Councilman Holland?
Aye.
And Councilman McCoy?
Aye.
Okay, so it passes.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Bailey. All right. Reminders of meetings.
Just have a couple. Annual Easter egg hunt is Saturday, April 1st, 9 a.m. at the Seaford Sports Complex, 490 North Market Street Extended. Then we have the annual Lighted Up Blue Autism Awareness Event, Monday, April 3rd at 6 p.m. in Gateway Park. And then the municipal election is Saturday, April 15th, between the hours of 7 a.m. and 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. There are 2 council members up for re-election for a 3-year term. And so far, we've had Councilman Santos file for re-election. Mike Bradley has filed for councilman, and Councilman Dan Henderson has filed for re-election. That is all I have, sir.
Thank you, sir. We'll go to committee reports with Administration IT. Councilman Santos.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My report has been submitted in its entirety. The following meetings were attended by city staff. Attended the walkthrough inspection of 106 Spring Street with the contractor to generate a final building punch list. They're anticipated to take over in the next 30 days. We all attended the East Seaford Block Watch meeting. Met with, a few of us went to Danny Short's coffee meeting, attended the SCAT dinner meeting and the SCAT steering committee. Met with Chris Simmons with Smart Utility Management to discuss water and sewer building revisions. Attended the monthly DMEC board meeting with executive committee. And attended the Seaford Village lift station renovation pre-construction meeting with the contractor. Other work was they worked on employee evaluations, participated in a technical interview, and an internal candidate did take the job. He participated in the police interview. They offered a job to a gentleman originally from Dover. Participated in call taker interviews. They offered a job to a lady who is finishing up her courses in criminal justice, and she accepted the job offer. Attended several bid openings. Attended the monthly code department meeting, and attended the Ed Timberline's retirement gathering. For the IT report, they completed training with Public Works and Electrical regarding the new e-alarm system. It's the dialer from the SCADA system. They worked on updating licensing for existing and new security cameras. Finalized and submitted budget information for fiscal year 2024. They worked with the electric department to get various security cameras deployed. For the administration report, they attended contract negotiations meetings with the IBW Local 126 and reviewed contract documents. They attended the Delaware Women's Hall of Fame art exhibit, and all other business is routine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Next, Police Fire, Councilman Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Have two complete reports by the chiefs, the Fire Chief Wilson and Police Chief Marshall Kraft. I'll start with the Fire Department. For the month to date, we have 24 fire calls for an average of 2.1 per day. for EMS statistics, there's 127 calls for an average of 9.7 calls per day. So those are the calls to date, actually, to yesterday, 313. There's, pardon me, total department responses, calls to date for the year are 957 calls for an average of 13.2 per day. Hours in service that it gives you between fire and EMS, tells you the totals for the month of February. Hours in service, a total of 548.5. Personnel in service, 2,364. Total personnel hours, 1,159.9. And total, keep note of this, because the total miles traveled is 6,319.4 miles. So the city responded to, for the year, 93 in-city calls for fire and 549 calls for the year, for a total of 642 for 2023. Out of the city was 56 calls year to date, and 344 EMS calls out of the city, for a total of 400. Out of assists were 19 in the fire department and 44 for EMS, for a total of 63. No significant incidents to report this period. Ladder 87 is out for repairs for DOT issues, and ambulance B87 went out to Wayside for body repairs from the accident incurred from an accident with the Caroline County vehicle at Tidal Health. I think I reported that in the previous report. I have some new data, which if you were to look at the total miles traveled of 6,319 for the year, we have a new category here that gives us fuel usage only for the month of February. Fire equipment pulled up to the gas pump 56 different times for a total of 879 gallons at a cost of $3,136.76. So there was 38 unleaded gasoline stops and 18 diesel stops. So I tell you this to illustrate that it's very expensive to operate these vehicles, just to keep you guys apprised that it does add up, and you see the equipment that's well cared for, but out and about in the community doing their responses and other events, public service events. So that's just another piece of information that I thank the chief for, and thank the administration. I think, was it Erica?
Erica. Yes,
Erica Colgrove pulled together and submitted. So we're going to be able to add this information just to show you the expenses and what goes into operating the fire department, along with some other data too that coming up. Under emergency medical services, as mentioned before, ambulance B87 is out of service. A87 is back from DOT reserves. That's ambulance A87. The firefighter EMT posting is still active. They did recently receive one candidate application. Firefighter EMT Aiden Gregg completed his heavy rescue training under his heavy rescue under pressure training, which if I have it correct, this type of training involves recovering people and other equipment from under load, under other large vehicles. So it's, I think they used to call them vetter packs. They're inflate trucks to remove personnel, and also oftentimes there's heavy trauma involved from people who get pinned under these things. So there's an awful lot of training that goes into that, and I want to thank Mr. Gregg for committing to that training, and so that we hope he doesn't have to use it, but if the need occurs, that there will be trained people to handle those situations. Career staff started yesterday. They're all attending alert training in Dover for active assailant training, and I believe, do we have Seaford Police Department staff involved in that training?
Myself and the chief will be attending one of the days for basically one of the main correspondents.
Okay, so Seaford Police Department personnel will be involved in presentations for this training. It was also brought to my attention that the Seaford Fire Department is one of the only departments in Sussex County that is committed to this training. I think you said that there were a couple other upstate departments that were participating in this type of training. Yes, so want to thank the leadership of the fire department for committing to this type of training, so that our people are trained to respond while responding while there's an active assailant engaged. They're out there sticking their necks out in the line of fire, helping victims and doing other heroic acts. It's just amazing to me that we don't ever want to see it happen, but at least if it does, we have people who are properly trained to handle it. News and events. Engine 87.5 covered Station 41, Camden, Wyoming, while they attended a funeral for one of their past chiefs. And on the 11th, this past 11th, Station 87 covered for Station 71 from 1600 hours to 0700 hours the next day, while their members attended their annual banquet. So turnaround is fair play, right? Yeah. So that concludes the fire department report. Under Seaford Police Department, Chief Kraft has submitted a full report. You'll see the column on the left for 2023 year-to-date. I would like to point out that under the 30 burglaries that occurred in 2023, 12 of those were theft from vehicles. For some reason, the crime collecting data bundles theft from vehicles as a burglary. So they are two separate crimes, and it's possible that it might be put in a different category, or the chief may elect to just make the theft from vehicles parenthetical, just to delineate that theft from a vehicle is a little bit different than breaking into a house. So there is a difference. So I want to point that out in the data that you see. Under all crimes, the 194 crimes, 8 felony, 39 misdemeanors, 2 violations, 4 civil, and 141 other, for an 87% clearance rate. Under additional crime data below, there were 16 complaints consisting of aggravated assault, burglary, fraud, larceny, and stalking. 6 of these were felony and 6 of these were misdemeanors, and it excludes shoplifting. The clearance rate has dropped down to 25% due to pending active and pending inactive investigations. They're doing some investigations that haven't been able to be cleared yet, so we look for those to be cleared hopefully in the next period. Under drug complaints, there are 23 drug crimes, 16 adults. Fortunately, no juvenile arrests in this period. Prosecution decline were 7. Under traffic, 218 traffic contacts, 99 citations in 8 mornings, 2 DUIs, 1 drug and 1 alcohol related, and 1 was crash related. We had 29 crashes during this period, 6 injury accidents. Some of these were on private property. No, I'm sorry, strike that. All these listed were on public roads. 7 non-reportable, 16 reportable accidents. We had driver inattention is the primary cause of the accidents. We had 4 hit and runs. 3 of these were on private property, Woodland Mills, Walmart, and Fallon Avenue. And another hit and run that was on public street, which is Norman Eskridge Highway and Dutton Avenue. You'll see the crime view charts with the days of the week and the times of day that they were most active on the peaks. And there were a number of significant actions that I'll let you read about in your own time. So the administration attended director, staff, and liaison and council meetings as scheduled. The chief did that, and they attended a meeting at City Hall. It was a community meeting. The chief, criminal lieutenant, and city manager, and myself, and other members of council were also there, most all of us. And the Citizens Police Academy is every Wednesday night up until April 5th. And I'd like to extend an invitation for council members and the mayor to come. It starts at 6 o'clock every Wednesday night through the 5th. And just introduce yourselves to the police academy. There's Deputy Chief, how many do we have? Like 20? Is it? 15? Okay, the room seemed full. Maybe it's because there were some other officers in there, but it's a full room. And really happy that city residents, some inside the city and some outside the city, have taken their time and commit to the next several weeks to go through this academy. It's very well worth the time. And I hope you guys get a chance to come out and interface with the students and the staff, the officers. Last bit of things, training. There was certified child first forensic interviewing. Detective Nanola attended. And then there was close quarter battle 2 training, Officer Jones and Palm. And they're going to be our spear team leaders. And he told me the acronym yesterday, and do you remember it?
I'm going to lean on the
What's the
deputy
acronym?
chief.
Special.
I got it. I gotta think of it.
You guys know these acronyms. I can't remember them.
Yeah.
He did tell us.
I believe it's Special Police Enforcement and Response.
Yeah, okay, Special Police Enforcement
We're not
and
going to
Response.
argue with you.
Sounds
It's not a sort team, and there's a difference. There's a structural difference and a tactical difference, but these 2 gentlemen are the team leaders, so they've taken this close quarter battle training, and they'll be taking more training and developing the team as they move forward. So That completes my report.
All right, thank you very much. Codes, Parks and Rec,
Thank
Councilman
you,
Holland.
Mr. Mayor. We'll start off with Parks and Recs, and we have a little show and tell for you as they're gearing up for spring. And they have repaired grills at Sirotman's for upcoming rental season. And they are busily cleaning up limbs and grinding tree stumps at Williams Pond Park, Aquinas Park, and Industrial Park, as the photos you see. And they have a new parks employee, Bob Sanger, started on Monday, March 6th. And registration for youth soccer closed on 2/28, and they have 250 plus participants that have registered, and teams have been started, and the rosters will be sent out on 3/13. And for the upcoming Easter egg hunt will be 4/1, and lighted up blue event is on 4/3, so hope we all can attend if possible. And they held youth basketball postseason coach meeting on 3/8 to make improvements for next season. And all the work is routine. That concludes my report for Parks and Recs. And we'll switch over to Code Department. 1,749 rental licenses have been issued, with rental inspections being completed for 2023. And Mayfair 1, Phase 3 is ongoing, and Ryan Homes submitted plans for review. And Bel Air single-family dwellings on Danfield Drive were issued permits for the first 5 lots. And all the work is routine, and that concludes my report.
Okay, thank you very much. And Councilman McCoy with Electric.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The report's been submitted in its entirety. I had a few highlights real quick. Since the last report, the crew have taken down the old infrastructure behind 106 Spring Street. They put the service back in place for the building at the school track. Nick Moore completed and submitted federal EIA report. And the crew helped Gary at the SVFD tower with security camera infrastructure. Regarding our director, he had his standard director's meeting, council liaison meeting, worked on year-end reports, and finished the FY24 budget, as well as having a staff meeting. And Nick Moore also was promoted to technical coordinator. Over the course of the next few weeks, they're going to pull some replacement fiber cable on Herring Run Road, start working in Bel Air single-family residence section, and start a new pole on Bridgeville Highway near My Eye Doctor for a riser pole. The report's been submitted in its entirety. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank all the staff so much for a busy couple of weeks. With that, I'll accept a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
Motion from Councilman McCoy. Is there a second?
Councilman Holland, I second that motion.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, thank you. Good night.